In the heart of Houston, it's fun, it's engaging, it's Chattin' with Chelsea. She's daytime's new bestie. Here's your host, Chelsea Edwards. Come back to me.
Hey, besties. Thank you for joining me for another Chat with Chelsea. I'm your daytime bestie, Chelsea Edwards. You know, for so many of us, life has not gone as we planned or as we imagined. And for some of us, that could include the process of becoming a parent. So if the traditional way hadn't worked for you, there are a lot of options. You know, surrogates, there's egg donors, adoption, all sorts of things, and they can be complicated. But today, we're going to dive into one of those options, IVF, or in vitro fertilization. Now, I know you may have heard the term, but unless you've been through it or know someone who's been through it, you may not really understand the process. So we are going to get into that today. I have one of my good besties in with her doctor. They're going to give us a glimpse, a window into what that process is, and maybe that'll help you if you're considering this as an option or you just want to better understand one of your besties who's going through it. All right, I also recently saw the film Eggs Over Easy. Such a good film. I recommend you check it out. It tells the story of several women who are trying to become mothers. Take a look.
Every day across the country, some woman is being asked the intrusive question of, when are you starting a family? Girl, you know you're getting older. When are you having a baby?
So the optimal time for a woman to try and get pregnant is during her 20s and 30s. But that is also the time when a professional woman, is either peaking in their career or still pursuing their career. In my 20s and 30s, I was in medical school, residency, and for me, that wasn't the optimal time to get pregnant.
When I was growing up, you really never had conversations with your parents about reproduction. The only thing that you were told when you were young is just don't get pregnant.
Again, I highly recommend. I will give you a warning. I did cry at the end of that movie. So many stories. And a lot of women don't tend to share what they go through to become mothers. So I have one of my BFFs in, Sherry, a CEO of Boost One Marketing. I know you are a busy lady and friend of the show. We appreciate all the work you do for us here at Chattin' with Chelsea. But we really wanted to bring you on to share this personal story because a lot of women really may not know a whole lot about this, but may be considering IVF. So let's start with where your journey started.
Yeah, I mean, I never even considered, oh, IVF would be something for me. I started my business when I was 23 years old, and the grind, you know what I mean? Like, as a woman, it's a little different. You know, men, they can do whatever. Until what, 80? Doc, you tell us. But, you know, as a woman, you don't really think of that. And the other thing is, I think when we were growing up, I know we're around the same age, that's not really a topic. You know, it's actually don't get pregnant, go to college, which I did, got my degrees, and, you know, you're just focused on being successful and like, how can I make my identity?
Yes.
And that was my focus, really.
And I think that a lot of that comes from the women before us who, you know, started their families early and then taught us to, you know, slow down, focus on your career, and then here we are. Right. I didn't have my son until, you know, late 30s, and you started this journey. So what made you want to start IVF?
So I knew that I didn't even really want to start IVF. At first it just started, I was like, you know what? I'm in a good place in my career. I've grown this business. I'm happy, and I think I want to freeze my eggs. And so I started researching it on my own. Like, how can I freeze my eggs? You know, what can I do? And I went to a couple different doctors before I chose my doctor, who you know you're going to talk to too. And I think that's important, doing your research and getting educated. Yes. But being actually honest is my mother back in the day had me a bit older. She was 28 when she had me, and years ago that was older. And she was 32 when she had my brother. And so, but she had her career, you know. Now I didn't do that because of her, though. Let me be clear. But I always was like, you know, you always have time. I have time. This doesn't matter. Yeah. And so about 2 years ago is when I got serious about, let me pick a doctor, let me figure out what I want to do. And that's when I chose Aspire here in Houston, went to several places before I chose them. I was most comfortable with them. And I was like, all right, let's start freezing my eggs.
So how did you find your doctor?
Well, actually, my OB at the time recommended Aspire, and was also another doctor they recommended for me to go meet and see how I felt about them.
Okay, that specific clinic, the Aspire is the clinic?
Aspire is my IVF doctor.
Oh, you're okay. Gotcha.
Dr. Dunn, who you'll meet today, that's my IVF doctor. My normal your normal OB is not who will do your IVF. It's completely different. But my OB recommended 2 places in Houston, and I went to research them. I actually had meetings, went and sat with the doctors first before I chose, and then went forward.
Okay, so good to get that recommendation from your OB.
Yeah, I would definitely get your recommendation from your OB, and then do your own research. But I would also go meet the doctors in person, because I feel like you're going to spend a lot of time talking to these people. You want to see who you're comfortable with and who you have that connection with. Just like if you're going to your dentist, if you're picking a financial advisor.
Yeah.
I hate to say it that way, but it is a big decision, and you want to be with someone that you trust and you are, like and trust.
Yeah.
And that was important to me.
And you're going to see them a lot more. As you mentioned, it could take several tries. So we're going to get more into that process right after this commercial break. We're back with my friend Sherry to tell us more about her personal IVF journey. Okay, so walk us through what that was like.
It's still like.
Yeah. What is it still like? Yes.
So it's a lot of unknowns, right? Like you can't really go into this expecting, and I think that was an issue. I went into this very excited. My first round of medication and my first retrieval got canceled. I did not get to the retrieval.
Retrieval of your eggs.
The retrieval of your eggs, yes. Okay. And for that is a procedure where you get put to sleep. You go to their surgery center, and it's about 30 minutes, but that's where you retrieve your eggs. But you have to prep your body for that. So when I say a cycle, or when someone says the IVF cycle, that could be about 6 weeks of medication before you can get to the retrieval.
So why was your first retrieval canceled?
My levels weren't right.
Oh,
yeah, my levels were very off, very low. My body was not reacting well to the medication.
Are we talking hormone levels? Okay.
Estrogen, hormone. You have to be at certain levels in order for them to move forward, because your follicles have to grow to a certain size to retrieve them, right? So it's just all the science involved. But I was devastated, and what happened was I had put, in my mind, I was like, you know what, I'm a very private person. I'm gonna just say that I'm doing this because I know that maybe it'll help somebody. And I think you probably saw my private page where I did that, right?
Yeah.
And then after it failed, I had to tell everybody that it failed. And then everybody, it was so emotionally draining. So I think the other part of this is mentally being really prepared, and whether you have a therapist or your person you talk to.
Yeah, because that's an aspect people probably don't prepare for, the whole emotional toll
it's hard.
Take.
I told you not to make me cry now today,
I'm trying not to.
I told her, don't make me cry, girl, come on. No.
It is an emotional process.
It is.
So after you did finally get the retrieval going,
well, it took a while. So after that first one, it was actually before the holidays last year around this time. So it was September of last year was my first try that got canceled. My doctor, they actually recommended me starting acupuncture. Highly recommend. Helped my levels. The next cycle that we did, my levels were it was actually night and day. And of course I take a lot of supplements, and you work out. I try to work out 3-4 times a week, and you're trying to eat. You try to do it all, right?
Yeah.
You can't do it all, right? But you try to do your best. But I've been going through IVF for over a year now, because if you think about a cycle, let's say it's even 4 or 5 weeks. Some of my medication cycles have been up to 6 weeks before a retrieval. Your body is going through a lot of how it's processing things, and then it fails.
Yeah.
So you're building up for a month, and you're hopeful, and you're going in every 48 hours for blood work, ultrasounds, all of it. And then, hey, you're canceled.
You mentioned we're the same age, so
you
can go ahead and tell us.
I'm 40.
Yeah, we're both 40. All right.
I started this when I was 38 and a half.
So, you were working this in while you're a busy career woman.
Yeah.
Doing all of this, how many times have you gone through the cycle so far?
4.
4 cycles. Okay. And so when we do the retrieval of the eggs, tell us about what that part is like.
So you're asleep. You don't really have to do much.
Okay,
That's on them.
Yeah.
So basically what will happen is the shots that I was telling you about that you start taking every day, and for me, a nurse came to my house and administered them, and you're taking shots to regulate your levels, to prepare your body for this retrieval. You're also going in to get blood work done every 48 hours and ultrasounds every 48 hours. So I would do them very early in the morning. I'd be like the first person in, so I could go work and do the rest of my day. So it is a lot.
Yeah.
So then you prepare yourself. I think it's like 36 or some crazy like weird number of hours before your surgery. You give yourself a trigger shot in the stomach. You go to surgery the next day, you get put to sleep for like 30 minutes, and you come out and they'll be like, hey, we got this many eggs, and now we're gonna go to the next stage.
So is there a downtime after that?
No.
Okay.
You're
Knowing
fine.
you're back to work.
Yeah, you just can't drive, but you're awake, you're lucid, and you are asleep though. You don't feel anything. You're not. The most painful thing is the shots.
Got it. So from there, what are the next steps?
So from there, let's just say, for example, like, hey, Chelsea, you have 6 eggs. Okay. There's 2 options. You go and freeze your eggs, and we wait and we're done. Or you go ahead and make embryos with them. When you make embryos, those eggs get matched with your frozen sperm. And they're together, and then I think it's like 4 days. They monitor it for the growth.
Okay.
And after that, they'll call you like every 3 days and be like, hey, Cher, out of the 6, 3 made it. So let's say 3 didn't grow to the size that was needed. And then from there, you either just keep your embryos frozen, or you can actually do your transfer. You could do 1 embryo at a time, and if you want to, that's when you try to get pregnant. That's a whole nother medication process that you have to prep your body for.
So when did you go from freezing the eggs to I want an embryo?
Personally, right away for me.
Okay.
So you can do it right away. You can make embryos, and then you also have an option, which I chose to do, which is PGT testing, which tests the health of your embryos. So you actually are able to know if all the chromosomes are healthy, if there's any issues, science is crazy.
Yeah,
and it's an option. Not everybody does that, but you have the option.
So when you're going through these different cycles, you're getting the phone call that these embryos are not viable.
I mean, I've had calls where, let's say, the 1 or 2 eggs they got just didn't work. They weren't healthy, and they disregard them, and we decided if we want to do another cycle. So you go through all that
again, all over again.
All over again. You start from the beginning every time.
How do you recover? How do you keep picking yourself back up?
It's a very, you have to be very mentally strong. My doctors, luckily, are very personable, and they've asked me, where are you mentally? How are you feeling? Like last June, July, I did back to back. So it was medication, retrieval, started medication 2 days later, another, it was real quick, and we kept it going. It's a very, I will say the first cycle I wasn't mentally prepared as I was now. And I think that if you decide to go into this, you have to understand that it is not a light switch. It is not like you walk out and this is magic. It's not.
Yeah.
It's a process. And I think that I did not understand that at first, and I was crushed. I felt like a failure. That first cycle, Chelsea, I was crushed. I was crying. I was like, oh, this is I'm a failure. I can do everything and I can't do this. But you have to really hone it in and be like, okay, what are our options here? And I think that that's the important part of understanding your options and having a plan. Whether you're doing this alone, whether you're doing this with your partner, your husband, whatever it is, right? Yeah. For me, it was having a plan. My doctors and I are on the same page of our plan. Yeah. So that's the other part of it, okay, we're on the same page. We know this is where Sherry's at. And they for me, that was important too. My doctors and I have a great relationship, and they talk me through hey, how you doing mentally? Can you do another cycle? Can you do it? Is this something that you think you can handle? I think after that first failure, I went into everything else a little less emotional.
Okay. Well, you are not doing this alone, friend.
Thank you.
And we have your doctor here to give us more insight into this process.
Okay.
And we'll be back right after this.
You didn't make me cry. Oh.
We're continuing our discussion of IVF, and joining us now we have Dr. Timothy Dunn, Sherry's doctor from Aspire Houston. All right, so let's just break it down. How does IVF work?
So IVF, or in vitro fertilization, really nowadays encompasses kind of two processes. I think y'all talked earlier about egg retrievals, when we get eggs out, and the second component is when we actually place an embryo in the uterus for pregnancy, or what we call an embryo transfer. So when we're talking about the first component, what we're trying to do is stimulate a woman's body to produce more than the typical eggs per month. So the way her body works is typically each month she'll produce one egg contained within a follicle, and that's what she ovulates. Our goal is using some medications to kind of override the system, and instead of making one egg a month, maybe we make more than that. 3, 5, 10, 15, depending, the number we expect depends on her medical history, a lot of the testing we do for her. So the first component of IVF of a cycle is as we stimulate her with these medications, we're monitoring her response, checking hormone levels by blood, ultrasounds about every 2 days to look at the growth of the follicles. And then as we watch that group of eggs develop over about 2 weeks to kind of even a little beyond 2 weeks of the pure injections, we're then getting to a spot of, do we think these eggs are what we call mature? So mature, what we mean for that is, could we freeze them if a woman was doing egg freezing, or would these be ready to be fertilized if a woman was trying to make embryos and build her family? When we get to that point, she takes a medication, we call it a trigger shot, and what that does is it moves the eggs through a development to where they get to that point where we could fertilize them or freeze them. So that is the one that basically 36 hours later we come in and we do the egg retrieval. Now an egg retrieval is a procedure done under anesthesia so that the patient is comfortable with this, and with that we visualize the ovaries and the pelvis, drain the follicular fluid out of each of those little follicles that have grown, and as that we do that, that brings the egg out of the body. At that point it immediately moves to the embryology lab to either be frozen for long-term storage or to develop embryos. So that's really the first part of IVF. Once we have embryos, now we move towards trying to build a family and having a pregnancy.
Okay, that's a lot of parts, a lot of meds. How much is this costing?
So IVF, depending a little bit, is going to be varying on, are we freezing eggs, making embryos, because the generation of embryos does add cost to it, because we're working with these cells in the lab, under the microscope, all of those sort of things. Cost can have a lot of variation because it'll depend a little bit on the woman who's coming to see us. For example, we're testing her ovarian reserve, as we call it. Does she have an average number of eggs, below average, above average? All of that will influence kind of the cost specific for her care. How long does she need to go for? So cost, yes, it can be expensive, but at the same time, we're finding a couple benefits. One, as we get better at it, the costs come down. And then two, one of the things I think we're the most excited about is as more women are talking about this with their companies they work with human resources, et cetera, more and more insurance companies are actually having coverage. So in our clinic, we sometimes find that maybe 40, 50 to 60% of women might have at least some insurance coverage for a treatment cycle.
And what's the range?
I was going to say, what's the range of the cost?
Yeah.
Well, it depends. So what I did personally is when I was getting my new insurance is I told them I was going through IVF. And my insurance agent, or whatever you call him, he searched for companies that would cover it. I think a round can cost upwards of $10,000 easily.
Okay,
with no insurance.
Yeah.
With no insurance. But if you're thinking about doing this, I literally got on the phone with my insurance agent and said, listen, this is what I'm going to do. I need to find an insurance that can cover some of this. So there's ways to do it. You know, you have to be smart about it. And there's a lot of companies now, you know, that are offering your first round fully covered. So, so you have to check into that. I think it's important because I saved a lot of money by doing that.
Yeah, that's a good starting point. Right. We talked a little bit about our ages. How does that play a role in fertility?
So age and the age of the woman, when a woman comes and sees us, whether to freeze eggs, develop embryos, go through IVF, or just to talk about fertility in general, age is one of the most important variables in the entire discussion. So the reason that is a woman, when she's born, has the maximum number of eggs she will ever have in her life. And as she ages, we find reductions in what we call egg number, ovarian reserve. There's hormones called AMH that some women may hear about online. While that number goes down with age, we also find that egg quality decreases with time. Now, when we say quality, what we really refer to is what is the chance that an egg that is ovulated, or an egg that is frozen, or an egg that we try to make an embryo with, what's the chance it will have the right number of chromosomes? The reason that matters is the single most important predictor of if an embryo can become an ongoing pregnancy is if it has the right number of chromosomes within it. And so the reason age is so important is as a woman gets older, moving into her 30s, so we see the first change at about 32 towards 35. From 35 moving on, and especially at 40 and beyond, the chance of getting one of those good quality eggs in a month or in a treatment cycle unfortunately comes down.
Wow. Are there women who should not get IVF?
So really, I would say a lot of the decision on which way to move forward with a treatment cycle of any type really is going to be an individual decision between a woman and her physician, because there are a lot of variables that could play into it. Age, like we talked about, being very important. If she's in a relationship, her male partner, his health, some of his testing, all of those things will play into it to where we can have a discussion with her saying, is this a good treatment for you? What are the chances of success it could be for you? So really, every woman, every couple that comes in brings a lot of nuance that for us it's an honor to kind of talk through and say, what is a good decision that works for you and your family?
All right, a lot to consider, okay? We're gonna have our final thoughts on fertility right after this break. I want to thank my guests for coming on Chatting with Chelsea to have this important discussion. Dr. Dunn, what are your final thoughts when it comes to women considering their fertility?
I think one of the best things to do is if a woman is thinking about it is to have a consultation, to have a visit with a fertility specialist to talk through her medical history, her family building goals, all of those things, what the effective age in her life would be with her goals. I think really the best step, have a visit, talk through the options and see what is the best plan for you.
Sherry?
You know, I also think that people think if you have to go to IVF, there's something wrong with you. You have PCOS, endometriosis. I have nothing. I've never had any issues. So the first thing is you don't have to have something wrong to do it. And the second thing is if you are a young woman and you're just thinking about it and you're like, hey, you know, maybe even one day I want to have a family, I would say go meet with a doctor, figure out who you like, and just freeze your eggs, put them on ice. You'll be all right.
All right. Well, you are all right.
You'll
okay.
be all right.
We're going to continue to follow your journey. Thank you so much for being here. You can continue the conversation on Chelsea Show Fox on social media. We'll see you on the next Chat with Chelsea.